That American hostage release postponed. 4-hour gas lines in Lithuania. And Pete Rose faces tax evasion charges. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. Freedom is on hold tonight for one American hostage. Which one we do not know. A pro-Iranian group in Beirut said it has postponed its promised release because President Bush refused to send a key U.S. diplomat to Syria to coordinate final details. The president said his administration is not talking directly to the kidnappers. However, high-level talks were going on tonight in Damascus. Bob Simon begins our report.
After a meeting which broke up just before midnight, Syria's foreign minister said hopes are still high.
We hope that this American hostage will be released either on Saturday or Sunday.
The release had been postponed, the Islamic Jihad for the liberation of Palestine said in Beirut, because Washington didn't meet the demand. The statement was accompanied by a picture of Robert Polhill. Yesterday's promise of a release came with a picture of his fellow hostage and ex-teacher in Beirut, Jesse Turner. The organization had demanded that Assistant Secretary of State John Kelly come to Damascus to arrange the release. Instead, U.S. Ambassador to Syria Edward DeGirian rushed here tonight after a meeting with Kelly in Germany. He went straight to the Foreign Ministry.
We're staying in close touch with the Syrian government on the issue. That's all I can say now.
Before the delay was announced, Syria was making preparations for a release tomorrow. Syrian troops intensified security around the Beirut airport. The French and Belgian hostages freed last week were flown out from here. In Damascus, official Syrian radio was already providing the moral of the story. The release is proceeding thanks to Syria's good offices, it said. If Tehran wants hostages released to open trade routes with the West, Syrian President Assad wants to prove that all roads pass through Damascus. While the world watched and waited for the release of one hostage, in Lebanon it was carnage as usual. In East Beirut, Christians buried their dead from yesterday's fighting. In West Beirut, Muslims cleaned up after this morning's battles between rival militias. And somewhere in the midst of all this, 8 American hostages trapped in a situation which no one can control or really understand. Meanwhile, Washington remains trapped between wanting to get them out and not wanting to negotiate or appear to negotiate along the way. That's why Kelly didn't come to Damascus. That's why the release of one of the hostages has been, at best, delayed. Bob Simon, CBS News, Damascus.
President Bush made it clear he doesn't regret refusing the kidnappers' demand that he send diplomat Kelly to Damascus.
We have a perfectly capable, accredited diplomat on the scene in Syria to work toward the release if it comes to that. The second answer is the United States does not knuckle under demands.
That the hostage takers would announce a release and then toy with the President of the United States by delay or by reneging is nothing new.
We've been disappointed before, hopes raised, only to have them dashed by excessive speculation. I would add that we are not talking to the hostage holders. I would further add we are grateful to Syria for trying to play a constructive role in what is going on.
The Syrian government sent word yesterday to the U.S. that the message announcing the imminent hostage release was authentic. The administration was hopeful enough that it dispatched a medical reception team to Wiesbaden, West Germany. Now, U.S. officials and family members, like hostage Jesse Turner's mother, must deal with their disappointment.
You know, they like to do little things like that, you know, to get us upset. But hopefully they won't postpone it again.
But other hostage families are angry that President Bush refused to send Kelly to Syria.
God knows for 5 years I've heard from the White House, we will go anywhere and we will talk to anybody. And I am totally puzzled by the attitude of reluctance to move forward and get on with this. If they want John Kelly, then send them John Kelly.
Kelly didn't go, White House officials say, because President Bush didn't want any questions to be raised about negotiating with terrorists.
Politically, this is a very, very dangerous area. This is a minefield for the president politically, so he has to move very, very carefully.
Why do the kidnappers want John Kelly? No one knows for sure, but one thing is worth remembering. He was ambassador to Lebanon when the Iran-Contra scandal broke. He handled secret messages about the hostage deal from John Poindexter. Lesley Stahl, CBS News, with the president in Key Largo, Florida.
President Bush spoke at a joint news conference after meeting French President Mitterrand in Florida. He also said this afternoon that he was deeply disturbed by new Soviet moves against Lithuania and, quote, considering appropriate measures in response. This came as Mikhail Gorbachev struck at the vitals of Lithuania today. The Soviet Union shut off more than 80% of the tiny republic's natural gas on top of yesterday's cutoff of crude oil. Our Martha Teichner is there.
In Vilnius today, it took an hour to buy gas, and then only 2.5 gallons, if there was any left. Lithuanians are feeling the bite of Soviet sanctions more quickly and more painfully than they were told to expect, and they don't like it. The Soviets want us to rebel against our own government, this man says. We won't do it. We must save energy. There were demonstrations supporting independence, but not all Lithuanians were so defiant. Many are just plain scared. This welding equipment plant employs 3,500. Here, the workers think the independence government is selling them out. Notification has been received that tomorrow the gas will be turned off. The plant manager says he's frightened to tell his workers they will have no jobs. At the Muzhaiki oil refinery, the pressure gauges tell the story. Lithuania has 2 weeks' supply at most. More than 80% of its natural gas has been cut off. Only enough for household use is still getting through. Lithuania's prime minister in Norway, seeking emergency oil and gas, was told only if you buy it. Bad news, but not unexpected.
We are not that naive to think that United States or any other country of the West or all Western world would bail us out.
But tonight, Lithuania's president, Vytautas Landsbergis, was pleading for help.
No democratic country can to stay indifferent in the case of such economical aggression.
A Soviet Foreign Ministry spokesman told foreign journalists today that if the Lithuanians want the gas turned back on, they have to turn back the clock to before their March 11th declaration of independence. The Soviet Union doesn't care how they do it, he said. A moratorium, a freeze, they can call it whatever they like, just as long as that's what they do. Martha Teichner, CBS News, Vilnius.
President Bush reportedly is reversing course and now considering postponing production and deployment of new short-range nuclear missiles in West Germany. Some NATO allies call the missiles unnecessary now. Still to come on the CBS Evening News. Bruce Hall on the question of free speech and the Klan. David Dow on the stars and the planet 20 years after the first Earth Day. In Georgia today, arguments in a court case involving the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan wants the right to spread its message of hate, but hide behind a mask while doing it. Bruce Hall reports.
For nearly 4 decades, Ku Klux Klansmen in Georgia have been prohibited from wearing their traditional white hooded mask in public to conceal their identities. But now the law is being challenged.
You're in violation of Georgia Code 161138 and wearing a mask hood. Yes, sir.
Klansman Shade Miller Jr. says the ban is a violation of his right to free speech. Miller argues that having to show his face permits the public to taunt, harass, and discriminate against him because of his unpopular beliefs.
We want to hide our identity so we can go to work tomorrow. I may not have a job tomorrow on account of this.
The complete robe with the mask is symbolic free speech, just like burning the flag is free speech.
In state court today, attorneys for the Klan are trying to convince the judge that this is a First Amendment issue only, not a Klan issue. But Georgia and NAACP officials insist differently, that allowing the Klan to parade around in mask will incite fear and intimidation.
The overall robe and costume of the Ku Klux Klan, including its mask, was designed to incite fear in individuals, to intimidate, to do so anonymously.
If the law is overturned, many believe it will lead to increased Klan activity around the country. So Georgia officials have vowed to do whatever is necessary to keep the ban in effect.
We will defend it vigorously because the purpose is one that I do not think any right-thinking Georgia citizen could seriously challenge.
Regardless of the decision here, an appeal is virtually certain. And many people believe that this will become the test case to determine if the Klan can once again hide behind the hood. Bruce Hall, CBS News, Lawrenceville, Georgia.
Union members and creditors alike today hailed a bankruptcy judge's decision to appoint a trustee to take control of ailing Eastern Airlines. The judge last night threw out Texas Air Chairman Frank Lorenzo from the Eastern Post, responding to anger over Eastern's increasing losses and its plans to cut payments to creditors. Named as the new trustee to run Eastern was Martin Shagru, a pilot and airline executive. A major development reported today in the case of Pete Rose, baseball's fallen star. The former Cincinnati manager, player, and record setter seemed a sure thing for the Hall of Fame until he was kicked out of the game last summer. But even before then, federal prosecutors were looking into Rose's income taxes. Correspondent Frank Currier reports tonight the latest chapter in one of sports' sorrier stories.
Pete Rose, exiled from the major leagues for life because he gambled, has struck a deal with federal prosecutors to plead guilty tomorrow to charges of failure to report nearly $292,000 in income to the IRS.
Joe, I have no comment. You know that.
The charges are outlined in a legal bill of information unsealed late today by the courts, accusing Rose of filing false tax returns. It climaxes a year-long IRS grand jury probe that coincided with Major League Baseball's investigation into Rose's gambling. The unreported income included payments from lucrative appearances by Rose at baseball card and memorabilia shows, as well as unreported gambling winnings. Tax experts say Rose could face up to 3 years in prison and $500,000 in penalties.
There is a possibility that the judge could determine that Mr. Rose should be incarcerated for some period of time.
Since his banishment from baseball, Pete Rose has avoided controversy, quietly concentrating on a comeback, struggling to shed the image of a fallen idol and reemerge a legend in the Hall of Fame. He swings a new club now, playing golf from morning till night at his winter home near Tampa, with in-between visits to a psychiatric counselor for his admitted gambling problem.
I don't gamble anymore, and I certainly don't hang around with undesirables.
His personal appearances on the lecture circuit and at charity baseball games have been a hit with fans. It's part of an image repair strategy managed by his public relations handler, who sees the end of the grand jury probe as welcome news. The charges against Rose come as no surprise to his one-time close friend and chief accuser, Paul Jansen.
As easy as he broke the rule on betting on baseball, he broke rules as far as paying taxes. I know it, and he knows it, and soon everybody will know it.
Pete Rose will appear before a federal judge tomorrow in court, knowing his red-hot Cincinnati Reds will be playing but a few blocks away, unbeaten, but without him, in what may be their best opening season in history. Frank Currier, CBS News, Cincinnati.
Federal health officials said today that Americans are drinking less alcohol but using more cocaine. The Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta said alcohol consumption was down almost 4% for much of the 1980s, but cocaine consumption almost doubled between 1985 and 1988. New tensions between the United States and Mexico over drug enforcement policy today. Mexico's President Carlos Salinas de Gortari said today, and I quote, "We don't allow anybody to violate Mexican law." He spoke amid charges that U.S. federal agents recently kidnapped a suspect in Mexico who is wanted in connection with the murder of U.S. drug enforcement agent Enrique Camarena in 1985. A negotiated ceasefire went into effect at noon today in Nicaragua, and if the agreement holds up, that country's 8-year civil war is over. The U.S.-backed Contra rebels agreed to stop fighting, to begin laying down their arms next week, and to disband by June 10th. The Sandinistas have agreed to surrender power next week to the U.S.-backed government of President-elect Violeta Chamorro. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is out today with its annual report on toxic pollution by U.S. industry. The nation's factories released 4.6 billion pounds of toxic chemicals into the air, land, and water in 1988. This is said to be a 9% improvement over the year before. CBS News correspondent Deborah Potter looks this evening at another threat to the environment worldwide: people. Too many people, not enough resources. 20 years after Earth Day.
Another mouth to feed. It happens 3 times every second. Every day, almost 250,000 people come into the world, most of them in poor countries that can't begin to meet their needs. population is a time bomb that's already gone off, and the victim is the global environment.
In the developing world, the poor and the poverty-stricken people increasing in large numbers are really destroying the very base that they need to survive from, but it's because they need to survive that they're doing all this.
In Asia and South America, where population growth is explosive, peasants who need firewood and land to grow food are hacking down the forests. Worldwide, 26 million acres are lost each year. But the soil is quickly exhausted, and when nothing will grow, it bleeds away.
The world's farmers are now losing about 24 billion tons of topsoil a year. So each year they have to try and feed 88 million more people with 24 billion fewer tons of topsoil than they had the year before.
In much of the world where marginal land is overworked and overgrazed, the only winner is the desert. And as the sands take over, millions of people are forced to migrate, often winding up in cities like Cairo, already overcrowded and polluted. By the year 2000, half the world will live in cities, straining the resources of countries like Mexico almost to the breaking point. Mexico City is the world's biggest city and the most polluted. 22 million people, a third of them with no sanitation, and some actually living amid the mountains of garbage the city churns out. People and industry combined are fouling the water and making the air unfit to breathe. Every day, many Mexican families make their way to the north to work in factories near the U.S. border. In Juarez, they often wind up living in cardboard shacks, struggling to survive.
If we don't reach an equilibrium between population and resources, it doesn't matter how much we work. We will never be able to educate and feed and give jobs to our people.
After more than a decade, family planning groups are making some headway. Susana Vasquez, pregnant with her third child, says this will be her last. Her husband says more kids mean more problems.
The issue now is not whether you or I can afford to have several children. The issue is whether the planet can afford couples having several children.
Unless there is immediate action to control population growth by limiting birth rates, the harsh reality is that starvation and war will eventually do the job by driving up death rates. But without voluntary controls, world population will not stabilize until sometime in the next century at close to 14 billion people, and the consequences will be grim.
We are going to have a dirtier, more polluted, less pleasant, and less productive world. There will be more of us trying to live on a smaller resource base, and that means a certain level of impoverishment for all of us.
The desperate battle to preserve the Earth's dwindling resources will only be more difficult as more people cause more problems. In some countries, that battle already has been lost. Deborah Potter, CBS News, Washington.
Well, no matter how smoggy it gets this weekend, no matter how much acid rain falls, you'll still be able to see the stars come out for the environment. David Dow reports on glitz, politics, and pollution.
The endangered grass of the Florida Everglades is an unlikely place, you might say, for a rock music hero, even a former Beatle. But Paul McCartney is beating the bushes for his favorite cause, the Earth.
I recognize there's a huge need for a lot of action fast.
McCartney's Everglades Safari is the latest evidence of the greening of show business.
I drink to healing our planet.
Let's protect our planet.
As you know, I've already left one planet, and I'm not anxious to leave another one.
The environmental movement has mobilized Hollywood like few other causes.
I feel awful.
Suddenly, Bette Midler is an ailing Mother Earth. Madonna implores us not to bungle the jungle. Fighting pollution may have become the perfect script for the post-Cold War era.
There's no bad guy out there anymore that we're focused on. So I think it's the right time historically to say, well, what's the bad guy? The bad guy is the way we live.
As our concept being using this to push personal action, which will push business and political action to follow.
Two high-powered groups have been formed within Hollywood to promote environmental themes.
Okay, everybody, listen up. From now on, we're starting a recycling stack.
All told, the environment has made nearly 30 appearances in prime time this season. New hits mean new possibilities.
With the Mutant Ninja Turtles saying it's terrible, then you can bet kids will be concerned about that and not...
The Ninja Turtles, recruited to the conservation wars at another Hollywood power breakfast.
Ms. Streep, right there is fine.
The industry's eco-energy translates into political power.
Are we not allowed to know what's on the food? That's what's so distressing.
Insiders credit actress Meryl Streep's congressional lobbying with speeding the end of the pesticide Alar.
She went to talk to various senators. No matter how busy they were, Meryl Streep was going to be someone that they would be eager to see.
Entertainers have also raised millions of dollars. The star of television's Cheers has himself poured $500,000 into his own Clean Oceans campaign.
Getting an inordinate amount of money from Cheers made me stop and think, oh my God, all of this money, I better do something good with it, or who am I kidding?
Some serve by example. Actor Ed Begley Jr. drives an electric car or takes buses to the studio. Dennis Weaver's new home is built in part with recycled cans and tires. But too often, says one critic, Hollywood's lifestyle conflicts with its message.
You can't go to a fundraiser and give money to save the Brazilian rainforest and then drive a gas-guzzling car and hop into your private jet and move it back to your 40-bedroom house. There's a real problem there.
But conservationists welcome the star power.
Just tell your politicians you want to live in a clean world.
The stars, in turn, know that in the age of Earth Day, good ecology seldom means bad reviews.
Yeah, let it be. Let it be.
David Dow, CBS News, Hollywood.
And that's the news from our world and the stars tonight. A reminder, Americans fighting back to save the environment will be the subject of tonight's 48 Hours. We hope you'll watch. That's at 8, 7 Central Time, 48 Hours. Dan Rather for the CBS Evening News. I'll see you again soon.
When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me.